a social superpower as well, with advanced social institutions, but I doubt whether 20 years will be enough. I expect that Japan will remain socially backward compared to the West, even 20 years from now. The Japanese are just too insular to change so fast. It's easy to import technology. Importing social ideologies, however, especially from the West, which are so different from those of Japan, is much harder and takes much more time. I'm hoping in these 20 years that I will become an influential figure in Japan, especially if I can succeed in building artificial brains and creating a major new brain-building industry for Japan and the world. With that influence and fluent Japanese, I hope to persuade Japan to become a scientific superpower by creating elite research labs in Japan with the world's best salaries, etc. That is what I call golden labs. I will also try to make the Japanese aware of how socially backward they are by getting on the national media and explaining clearly why I feel the Japanese are living inferior lifestyles due to their intercultural ignorance. If you tell monocultured Japanese, the two terms are virtually synonymous in my eyes, that there are better ways to live, you'll have to explain very clearly how other cultures live, because with 99% probability they will not have had any experience of living in the West. With Japan being the top economic and scientific country in about 10 years or so, I think it should really turn its attention to improving its social wealth. I will really try to help out in this respect. If one watches Japanese TV, one soon realizes how few foreigners are to be seen on Japan's TV screens. The very few who speak good Japanese are conspicuous because of their novelty due to their round eyes and non-black hair, looking like Martians to Japanese, especially those with blue eyes and blonde hair. Even I find such people weird now after 5 years living here. When I see a foreigner, which is not often, except in the lab, I think to myself, hey, a gaijin, that is a foreigner. Until recently, Westerners have not been interested in working in Japan because the country was seen as being both socially and economically backward, that is, too inferior to be worth bothering with. Now that Japan is more or less caught up with the richest Western countries in real purchasing power terms, not just in exchange rate terms, Westerners are beginning to get interested in Japan and are considering working here. I'm a case in point. However, due to Japan's inferiority in terms of its level of social development, most Westerners do not take seriously the idea of living long-term in the country. Broadly speaking, in the 1990s, Westerners now see Japan as economically equivalent but still socially backward. In order to attract Westerners to stay in Japan, Japan will have to modernize its social institutions, something which has been quite neglected by its leaders over the years due to a preoccupation with catching up to the West in economic terms. If I do get on Japanese TV with fluent Japanese, I will appear as a tropical bird amongst penguins. As I mentioned above, I was on the European media 150 times in the early 1980s, preaching masculism, men's lib, so I have lots of experience doing this kind of thing. It will not be easy for me to persuade the Japanese that their lifestyles are inferior due to their intercultural ignorance. Their knowledge of how other societies live, that is, a gut-level, first-hand experience type of knowledge, is minimal, Japan being the most insular of industrialized countries on the planet. See the section below on Japan's insularity. But I want to do this because if I don't, I will continue to see Japan as socially backward, which frustrates my desire to be living in the number one country. When I and others like me, that is socially and politically minded scientific researchers from the West, come to Japan in large numbers, we will bring our Western social values with us. These researchers will probably be frustrated by Japan's social inferiorities and, like me, will be motivated to help reform Japan by turning it into a modern country in terms of social development. These talented Westerners will probably influence Japanese profoundly, shaking up the country and making it lose its social complacency. Such reform efforts are unlikely to come from monocultured Japanese because they don't know what the Western reformers are talking about. Western social ideas are outside their life experience. I predict that within 5 to 10 years, large numbers of the world's best researchers will be living in Japan, so if they get socially active within 20 years, it's likely that Japan will be a lot more modern socially. If so, then if I live another 30 years, which is one of my goals, by keeping healthy, no smoking, no drinking excessively, keeping away from fatty foods, exercising every week morning, trying to go to bed on time, etc., that is, until I'm 80, well, and ad-libbing, I'm now expecting to reach 100. Literally, my father is 98, healthy, and will probably get 100, and I think I've got his longevity genes. So 80 is too conservative for me. In a few days I'll be 70 anyway. and I don't even have grey hair, then I'll be able to die with a pride in my chosen country. Since then I've rejected both Japan and China. I'm fed up with both. I'm back to the West in about a year or so. Saying this in 2017. I will be able to see Japan as number one economically, number one scientifically, and hopefully number one socially. That's my dream. But who knows? Maybe in 30 years the nation state will have died, killed off by 21st century global telecommunications technology, thus making my desire for pride in a particular nation old-fashioned. The fashionable people in 2030 will probably be globalists or globists. I'm a globist. Globist. But at the moment there are too few of us anywhere to form a critical mass. Superb engineers. If you ask the proverbial man in the street almost anywhere in the world to freely associate with the word Japan, you'll almost always get some Japanese engineering company name in the reply. Japan has a well-earned global reputation for producing superb engineers. The Japanese and the Germans have a strong reputation for producing well-designed engineering products of real quality and reliability. Japanese cars, for example, as long as they are made in Japan with Japanese workers, have an international reputation for being reliable and not breaking down as easily as those from other countries. This comes from a centuries-old tradition of craftsmanship in Japan. The Japanese are noted for their diligence in taking care of the details that make the difference between a reliable product and one that will fail a year or two later. This attention to detail is one of the great attributes of the Japanese. In my 5 years living in Japan, it has become second nature to me that Japan's machines function. When I travel to other countries and look at the level of workmanship, I'm often disgusted, or at least disappointed. Japanese children are raised to give effort to their tasks. It's a strongly held national value, and it translates into high-quality craftsmanship and superb engineering. All over the world, people enjoy the fruits of Japanese electronic products, the Walkmans, the Discmans, the transistor radios, the TVs, the palm-top computers, etc. That's interesting. Ad-libbing. It shows this essay was written 10, 20 years ago. Things have definitely dated. Technology moves on. Japanese cars are very popular everywhere because they are so reliable. Japanese seem to care more for concrete things than the abstract. They like hardware rather than vague ideas. This characteristic is useful to me because I want Japan to build artificial brains for me. I can provide the thinking, and then Japan can give me the engineering. Although, being honest, the high-tech I use is so state-of-the-art and changes so rapidly that the Japanese seem to have been left behind lately by the Americans, so I use American hardware. Once the time comes to scale up my brain-building ideas, Japan's strong engineering traditions will become very useful to me. It's one of the main reasons I choose to live in Japan, despite my contempt for so many of its social failings. See the cons section below. High-tech investment. As stated earlier, I've chosen to live in Japan, predominantly for economic and career opportunity reasons. Up until about a decade ago, when I was starting my PhD, I automatically assumed that if I proved to be a good researcher, I'd end up in the US, the top scientific nation, and still is. But then I started getting interested in Japan and its incredible growth rates since World War II, and began thinking, if these rates continue to be superior to America's, then sooner or later Japan will be able to buy the world's top brains, bring them to Japan, and make Japan the world's top scientific nation. It's only a question of money. Researchers' top priority is to find research employment. They are a very cosmopolitan lot and move to where the work is. I'm a strong advocate of Japan opening up to the world to create gaijin, that equals Japanese for foreigner, gai equals outside, jin is person, dominated research labs. Thanks to Japan's high savings rates, about 15% compared to America's 5%, Japan can afford to invest heavily in high-tech research, and it does. Japan educates more scientists and engineers in absolute numbers than the US, and Japan is only half America's population. Research spending in Japan keeps increasing, whereas in the US it grows at a much slower rate, as it must due to the lower savings rate. One of the great strengths of Japan is the superb intelligence of its elite bureaucrats who have the real power and guide the country long term. These mandarins know that the future of Japan depends critically on its investment in high tech. Japan cannot continue to rely on mass production industry to create Japan's wealth in an era of increasing high-tech. These mandarins put pressure on Japanese companies to invest in high-tech and help establish special science cities to foster long-term research. I hope to take advantage of this investment and in turn hopefully give Japan a new industry, namely brain building, that is, building brain-like computers. Long-term thinking. Some of the reasons why I choose to stay in Japan are derived from my immediate circumstances in the lab I work at. Japan has an ageist, seniority-based salary policy. That is, one's salary generally goes up with age, plateauing at about 50 years of age, so that a less able older guy gets more than a very able younger guy. Since I'll be 50 in 1997, I get a good salary by American full professorial standards, and I don't have to teach. My lab has in-house funding, so I only have to persuade one or two people to get projects paid for. The lab is rich, a symptom of Japan's growing affluence and willingness to spend on blue sky research. The lab gives each researcher one or more workstations and considerable specialist hardware. My rent is 80% paid. Health insurance is paid. My research division, about 80 researchers, already consists of 1/3 gaijins, so I don't feel alienated. The lab is wonderful at organising publicity, so the media pours in. Invited researchers get 20 working days vacation per year, and on average an international trip paid per year. Most importantly, research projects are long-term, that is 8 years. I don't have to limit my research horizons, Western style, for a year or two. Such limited time horizons generate toy projects which can be implemented quickly, giving toy results. I really admire the long-term thinking of the Japanese. It gives me the opportunity to sink my teeth into something solid and long-term. For example, my CAM brain project, to build an artificial brain. I can't do that in the West with its 2 to 3 year research project horizons. I'm running out of memory. I think I will stop here.